Hi folks, bit different today, it's a bit chilly, but I'm still here. I might end up taking my coat off once we've got moving a little bit. So I thought I'd talk today about being playful with our movement. So I'm going to go through some just general stretching and moving it to kind of prep us for a bit of crawling, and then go through a few different crawling patterns. Hi Veronica. And yeah, so I'm going to go through sort of different levels. So if something is not available to you, then obviously just skip that bit. So I've talked a lot about hand and wrist prep. I am going to go through the hand mobilizations again. So I've interlaced my fingers, just kind of have them loosely interlocked, so that as you mobilize your wrists and you sort of turn them round, you're allowing the whole of your hand to go through that range of motion. And then change the direction. And then we're going to go through the wave. So I'm going to take one elbow up, sorry, and push it all the way through the hand and out the other side. And then I'm going to reverse it. Bring the backs of your hands together. Just kind of let your elbows be heavy. Don't lose the contact to the back of your wrists though. Try and keep them in contact. And then just kind of moving the wrists around. So I'm going to stretch my hands apart here. Take them forwards, keep the back of the wrist in contact at this bit, really curl your fingers in here, and that's going to give you a stretch on the outside of the hands on the forearms. I'm going to go back the other way. So these are just nice little wrist preps to prepare you for a bit of weight bearing. You can do this stuff on your knuckles. But yeah, so I'm going to sort of, in my all fours position, just start to let my weight shift around a little bit. Let your weight come back to give your hips, knees, toes a stretch, and then come forwards. Let your weight shift over your hands. Turn your hands in different directions. I'm not going to spend ages on this bit now. If you can get them back towards your knees, then great. Here, let your fingers bend and let your elbows bend. Let your weight shift around a little bit. And then come back here. And so I'm going to work a little bit of rotation now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my left hand into the ground and rotate my upper body over this shoulder. And you can kind of move around a little bit there. And then I'm going to come back, press my right hand into the ground, rotate my left side away from the floor, and shift my weight over my right hand. And you can just kind of continue that in your own time, where you're I'm not just lifting one hand, I'm actually rotating my whole torso over this shoulder, so that I'm challenging my shoulder as well as my core. Try that with the lower body now. So I'm going to keep, I wish I could change this camera, but I can't. But yeah, basically I'm going to keep my hands in contact with the ground. Now I'm going to push my left knee down and let my right leg come away from the floor and alternate. So I'm rotating my pelvis now away from the ground. Let's see if I can, it's probably going to adjust again, but you could see there, right? So basically if you have your neck relaxed and you look down at your thighs, then you want to see that the stabilizing leg stays vertical. It's not kind of swaying out to the side. I'm not picking this leg up to the side. It's not exercising the leg that's lifting. The stabilizing leg stays vertical, and I'm rotating over that hip joint. And then put the two things together. So we're going to go right arm, left leg. So you're kind of prepping for crawling patterns. We're practicing the coordination and the strength. And then we're going to bring your elbows down to the ground and just kind of let your weight shift back so you can give your shoulders a bit of a stretch, making sure, you might not be able to see that well because I'm wearing a coat, but you want to make sure your ribs aren't collapsing, you're keeping your shoulders stable. You can move forwards and back and just kind of let your weight shift around a bit. And then I'm going to step one foot by my hand, flatten my back, tailbone up, just let my weight shift around a little bit. So here you can really be playful with that. You can let your weight shift forwards, let your ankle drop out, move around a little bit, so you're just kind of mobilising that hip joint a bit. And I'm going to have a go on the other side, so I'm going to step that foot forwards, flatten my back, push my hands into the ground, and you can just be a bit freeform with this, just kind of feel where your body feels tight, where do you need to spend a bit more time. How does it feel as you kind of turn a little bit? Okay, and then we're going to think about the actual crawling. So pushing the ground away with your supporting limbs, you're going to let your weight travel forward so that you can then let your limbs land again. So I'm creating a little bit of height before I come into the movement. So I'm not just picking my limbs off the ground, I'm pushing the supporting limbs into the ground to travel forwards. And then the same coming backwards. So you want to kind of use that same coordination to feel like you're actually pushing your whole weight back before you place the limbs down. So it's not just the limbs going, the supporting arm and leg are bearing my weight and my core's engaged as I'm travelling forwards. Hi Anne. Okay, yeah, so it is warming up a little bit now. Doesn't take much crawling to get you warmed up a bit. Alright, so that's just basic crawling where we're keeping our knees down on the ground, yeah? Well, obviously not the one that's travelling, but you know what I mean. Well, you don't know what I mean because you haven't seen what's coming next yet. So let's say I was to push my hips up. I'm not doing a proper yoga down dog. I'm basically just taking my hips high. So now my knees are off the ground, and this is kind of a next level preparation for some more complex crawling patterns, or more difficult crawling patterns. So it's the same thing basically. I'm taking opposite limbs off the ground, coming forwards, coming backwards, and you can play around with changing directions. You can kind of go side to side. Now this starts to get a little bit tiring after a while. You don't have to worry too much about form there. You can keep your knees bent. It's just slightly tougher than crawling with your knees on the ground. So the next crawling pattern we're going to have a go at is with your knees hovering just off the ground. So this is a beast crawl. So if you push your hands into the ground, let your knees hover off the floor just a little bit. Can you maintain that? Are you able to support your weight with your knees off the ground? This is, you can tell I'm getting out of breath, it's already quite hard work. So if you let that rest and play around with that. So we're just going to let our weight shift forward into our hands, lock the arms, try and get your arms nice and straight and see whether you're able to let your knees hover off the ground. And then we're going to play around with taking one limb off the ground. So I'm just taking one foot off. And can you take the other foot off? Not both at the same time. Much harder in that beast hold to take your hands off. So I'm sort of prepping for that a little bit. So yeah, if you come into that little rock forwards, let your knees hover off the ground just a little bit, and then see what it takes to take one hand off. And then other side. Can you go opposite limbs? So right hand, left foot, and vice versa. Whoa, is it much harder on one side than the other? I'm going to give the backs of my hands a little break here, so I'm going to bring the hands down. If that's too much for you, then just, Vicky, you're so welcome, you're really kind, bless you. Then just bring the backs of your hands together here and come into a little bit of rotation. Can you give them a shake out? This is another animal flow hand mobilization, but can you wrap your first 3 fingers in and leave your thumb and little finger free, and then just give your wrists a little flick, so you're sort of shaking out the joints. Actually, that feels really nice after you've been weight bearing for a bit. Now, can you do it without letting your fingers go? Yeah, so the fingers tend to try to escape as you're flicking your wrist. Also, when I'm in class, I see a lot of people just kind of doing this. So we want to kind of really, it's a wrist flick. All right. Anyway, I'm digressing. So we're going to come into a different kind of crawl now. This is a crab crawl. So first we need to know if we can get into a crab position, which from the side kind of looks a little bit like a letter M. Can you see that? So you want your bum kind of in the middle, not too close to your heels, not too close to your hands. Find a central position. You want to feel quite neutral in the pelvis, so just kind of check a pelvic tilt there. So you can tuck the tailbone under around it. Oh, the sun's coming out. It's really warm when it comes out, but then it keeps going cloudy again. Okay, yeah, so you're pushing the ground away, and you can work on taking one limb away at a time. So you might have to rotate a little bit, as in you might have to let your weight shift a little bit here. So if I was to take my left hand off the ground, you can see my weight shifting a tiny bit, but I'm trying to minimize it as much as possible. It's easier with the feet, you can keep both hands on the ground. I've got my fingers facing away from me as well for this. So then to take the crab for a walk, so to come into a little crab walk, we're just going to take opposite limbs off the ground, step forwards, just keep it going, and then take it backwards. Okay, and again, give your wrists a break, give your wrists a rest. All right, so we're going to come back into that high hip position, that sort of bear position, bear crawl. So I'm going to press my hands into the ground, let my knees come off so my hips are high. You don't need to have your heels down, you don't need to have your knees straight. But I'm going to take a step forwards with my right hand and my left foot, and then I'm going to drop my left hip towards the ground. So I'm pivoting my feet so that my heels come down, and I'm going to let my hip rest like that, and then come up, take a step with the opposite hands, opposite hand and foot should I say, and let your hip drop down. So I'm going to move that backwards now. There, there, up, there, there, and down, and rotate up. Alright, if your knees can handle it, we're going to come into a wide knee position and let your feet drop out to the side. We're just going to start by letting your hips rock back a little bit. So you are going to keep your pelvis neutral, don't let it round as you go back. And then I'm going to straighten one leg, let my hips shift back, and alternate. You can stay with this version if that's enough. Or you can let your hips land all the way down and challenge that hip strength to be able to control that descent and get yourself back up again. You could also use your hands to support you as you come up and down. So I called today's class playful because it is just about moving in complex ways, making it fun, and challenging yourself without being attached to how well it goes. Complex movement is really good for the brain. So anything that involves you having to think about what to put where, you know, if anything that sort of makes your brain concentrate a little bit on the you know, where you're going with the movement, helps kind of bring you into your body. It helps with self-awareness, mindfulness. There are so many reasons why complex movement is good for the brain, but apart from anything else, it usually feels really good. So even if it's just the simplest variation on whatever we're doing, it doesn't matter what it is that you do, as long as you are doing something that's a little bit different to what you did yesterday. All right, so keeping it super short again. Thanks for joining me if you popped in, and yeah, I'll see you all next week. All right, thanks, bye.